Hail State, everybody. Welcome back into Dear Old State. Joel Coleman, Logan Lowry here with you on the show today, as always. And some shows that we do, Logan, they're more special than others. This one, I think, for you and I, very special. We have the chance to be joined by head coach Richard Williams, men's basketball leader here at Mississippi State, for such a critical part of our history, some of the most successful years in school history under your watch. Logan and I were growing up, got to enjoy them as fans. Now we get the chance to sit here and reminisce about some of those years, Coach. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, if you and Logan were watching my teams play as fans, that tells you how old I am, because you two guys are older than dirt.
No doubt about it. We're just telling you, we're both north of 40 now, so we're getting on up there. But some of the, best Bulldog moments of our lives, you helped produce them. So we thank you for coming and putting up with us
I appreciate
today.
that. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, as I can tell, the guy that's actually producing this show, Daniel Black, I was telling him earlier, I had a Mississippi State Final Four shirt, 1996. I was in 8th grade, and I remember proudly, because those were hard to come by at that time. I mean, everybody was buying them as soon as they were printing those things, and I was lucky enough to find one, and I proudly wore that to school. That was a really pivotal time in my life. I was a huge Mississippi State fan, and to have you on the show has really been it's really a pleasure for us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys inviting me.
Well, we're gonna lead all the way up to Logan having the chance to even have a Final Four shirt and all that went along with that. But I don't really know where to start, Coach, other than we'll rewind all the way back to pretty close to maybe the beginning. A Mississippi guy. Just when did Mississippi State for you get on your radar? Were you a Bulldog growing up? Just what made you want to even come to Mississippi State, which you did as a student eventually, but were you a Bulldog all along?
Kind of. I was always a Mississippi State basketball fan, because when I was growing up, Babe McCarthy was the coach at Mississippi State, and they were very successful in basketball during those years. And so I would listen to the Mississippi State broadcasts. Even then, Jack Crystal was broadcasting the games. And so I was a Mississippi State basketball fan, followed the baseball team because I was more involved in baseball than I was basketball. But I didn't really have any connections with Mississippi State, other than I had a cousin who did go to school here. He served in World War II and then came back to school, and his whole family, all of my family, were Ole Miss fans. He was the only one that ever went to Mississippi State. And I would be at his house every once in a while with my mom and dad, and he had Mississippi State annuals. And I'd sit there and go through some of the Mississippi State annuals. So that was really the only connection I ever had with Mississippi State. But the way I ended up in school here, Joel, is when I graduated high school, my parents couldn't afford to send me to college. And so I applied at different schools, and I applied for a National Defense loan. Back in those days, it's one of those loans you had to pay back. It wasn't free. And they were giving those to math and science majors more than anything else, because you're talking about late 60s. Yeah. And so they needed math and science teachers. And so I filled out the application and said I was going to be a math major. And about maybe a month before school started, that loan application came through. And I had a small academic scholarship also from Mississippi State. And I actually wanted to go to Hines Community College. That's where all my friends were going to school. That's where I wanted to go. But when that loan thing came through, my mother said, no, you're going to Mississippi State. First time I was ever on campus here is when I came to register.
Wow, that's amazing. And during that time, could you have ever envisioned, some 20 years later that you would become the head men's basketball coach? Would that even cross your mind when you were a student here back in the 60s?
No, actually not. And, it's, as I said, I came here and because of finances, and I had 2 jobs on campus. I was working in the cafeteria for my meals. We got our meals free. And I got a job in the PE department as a student instructor in the PE department. Now, we didn't teach class. We taught volleyball maybe one week, handball one week, tennis, and there was no teaching. You just had the roll call. And if they showed up, they made A's. And so I got involved or interested in basketball because I was over in McCarthy Gym all those times doing those classes. And so I would arrange my schedule in the cafeteria where I was working in the morning. So my afternoons were available, and I'd go to the McCarthy Gym. I think I had 4 hours a week, made 75 cents an hour. So that $3 a week was my spending money. And so I'd watch the players. They'd come in after, that's the only gym on campus during those days. And they would come in and play their pickup games. And if they needed an extra one, they would say, hey, come on, play with us. And so I got to know some of the players, and that's how I got interested in basketball. And then graduated and had a math degree, interviewed all over the southeastern United States, offered jobs everywhere I interviewed, but nobody would let me coach because I was not a college athlete. And so Natchez, I interviewed in Natchez, Mississippi at Natchez High School, and they were the only school that offered me a coaching job in addition to the teaching. So I took the job in Natchez teaching 5 math classes a day, and I was the assistant baseball coach. And back then, the baseball was not one of the high-level sports like it is now. Yeah. It's kind of low on the totem pole. And an interesting aside to that, my first boss in Natchez was John Carrero.
Really?
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
John Carrero was the head football coach and athletic director at Natchez High School. So I tell everybody, whatever success or whatever failure, John, you're responsible.
So you're an assistant baseball coach at Natchez. I'm curious, how did you finally, I guess, break down that wall and get into the basketball side of things?
Well, as I said, I like basketball, and I loved it. I loved the game, but I really was a baseball guy. That's what I wanted to do. But I was teaching at the high school, but my roommate was teaching at one of the junior high schools in Natchez. And he coached 7th, 8th, and 9th grade football, and then was going to coach 7th, 8th, and 9th grade basketball. Well, when the football season was over, he came to me and he said, "Look, I'm worn out. Will you coach the 7th grade basketball team at Montebello Junior High School?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do that if they'll let me." So I went to see the superintendent of education, Dr. McLaurin, and explained that to him. He said, "You'd be love for you to do that, Coach. You can coach the 7th grade team at Montebello, and we'll pay you a $200 supplement for that." And so I coached the 7th grade basketball team at Montebello Junior High School, and somehow we won the little Miss Lou Conference Championship. That's the schools in Natchez. We had 3 junior highs in Natchez, then Faraday and Vidalia, Louisiana, the Miss Lou Championship. And so we won that championship, and I'm still waiting on that $200 supplement.
Well, obviously, there's a lot of people throughout the state, and my sister's in this category. She coaches high school volleyball, and she coaches high school softball. So, there's people make a good living doing that. Obviously, you're starting out at that level. How do you make it to the college ranks from that high, from coaching junior high to the heights that you got to? How did that door open?
Well, sometimes you get lucky, and I was lucky. After that first year, the second year actually, I just sat on the bench with the high school team and kept a shot chart. And the assistant coach in basketball, who was also the head baseball coach, he was my boss in baseball, he became the head basketball coach when the other coach left. And so I worked as his assistant for 2 years, a guy named A.C. Williams. Then A.C. went on and became the head basketball coach at Delta State College. Back then, it's Delta State University now. I was promoted to the head basketball coach at South Natchez High School. So I was the head basketball coach, still the assistant baseball coach, and then won some games there and interviewed at Copiah Lincoln Junior College and got the job there. Now, while I was coaching at South Natchez and Colin, I started working basketball camps in the summer. And fortunately for me, one of the camps I worked a few summers was Bob Boyd's basketball camp here at Mississippi State. So I got to know Coach Boyd. And then a job came open when Dave Farrar left here. Dave was the part-time assistant coach, and Dave left to take a job at Western Kentucky, and Coach Boyd hired me as the part-time coach. I took a salary cut leaving Colin to come here as the part-time coach because the part-time coach then, all they could make was the amount of a scholarship. So I was a part-time basketball coach here and also worked in college and school relations for Jimmy Abraham in the mornings. I signed Jimmy Abraham's name to more recruiting letters than Jimmy Abraham did.
Oh, so were you reaching out to Coach Boyd looking for this opportunity? Did he reach out to you? How'd that work?
Well, working his camps, I probably made him aware that I'd love to coach at this level at some point. And I guess he reached out to me and offered me the job. But what really happened, Coach Boyd was on here 2 years after I became the assistant coach. And he announced his resignation in December of his second year. And so when he announced his resignation, I immediately went and visited with Charlie Carr, who was our athletic director at that time. I said, "Charlie, I'm a Mississippi State graduate. I'd love to be considered for this job." And at that point in time, he told me I had no shot. I would not be considered for the job. And I could understand that. I was the part-time assistant.
Yeah.
And so as time went on and Coach Boyd, the season was over, Coach Boyd recommended me for the job for whatever reason. And then it's a long story how it evolved, but anyway, Charlie Carr ended up hiring me because basically I was the last man standing. A lot of people turned the job down, and I ended up getting the job, and so that's how it all started.
A lot of coaches, that's really all they've ever done is coach. You coming from a teaching background, I really think that there's a correlation there between teaching, in the classroom and then teaching, players, how to run plays or whatever. How is that correlation? How does being a teacher at some point has helped you in your coaching career?
Well, I think coaching and teaching are synonymous. Coaching is teaching. If you're really coaching, you're teaching. When I have a math class and if I'm teaching students how to solve an equation, they've never done that before. So I have to teach them how to do that step by step by step. And it's repetition. Coaching is the same thing. If you're teaching a particular offense or a particular offensive set or a particular way you want to defend a ball screen or a pin down, some of them have never done that before. So you explain those things to them, you take them through that process step by step, and it's all repetition. So coaching is teaching, teaching is coaching.
Tell us a little bit about those early days of head coach Richard Williams at Mississippi State. I know the heights that we would eventually get to, it didn't come immediately. What are you learning in those early days? Just what's some of those early years like for you here?
Well, of course, I inherited a team that didn't win many games the year before. In the first year, we kept some of those players on the team. Kept John Brady as my assistant. John had been here as an assistant before I was here. And I kept John as an assistant coach. And we went through that first year and obviously struggled. But second year, we decided we were going to completely change the recruiting philosophy. Didn't bring some of those players back. I like to kid around and say I started the transfer portal. I was the originator of the transfer portal. But so that next year, the first recruiting year John and I had together, we signed 8 high school players, and 6 of those players were from Mississippi. And I felt like it was very important to get Mississippi players if we could, because we are a Mississippi school, and those guys take some pride in representing a university where they grow up. And so we signed those 8 players, and 6 of those 8 stayed with us all 4 years. And you talk about tough times. That second year, Joel, we went to Hawaii to play in a tournament, and we'd won some games early because our schedule was easy. We made sure our schedule was where we could win some games. Went to Hawaii and then came home, and our first conference game that year was at Kentucky. They were ranked number 1 in the country. Eddie Sutton was the coach. Halftime score was 55-17. We didn't have the 55. But I like to say, 4 years later, and we started 3 or 4 freshmen in that game.
Yep.
4 years later, that team won the Southeastern Conference Championship.
Yep.
First conference championship Mississippi State had won in 38 years. 1963 was the last one, and you guys are aware of the Game of Change. That was the team, the Game of Change. That was my senior year in high school, so I knew all about that. And we'd gone to the NIT the year before that. Before we won the 91 championship, we went to the NIT and won a game in the NIT. And I think that was only the second postseason bid. I think Mississippi State had gone to the NIT one year, and don't like to talk about it, but lost here at Humphrey Coliseum to Alcorn State. But that was the only other time. So Mississippi State had struggled since Babe McCarthy left and been through a lot of coaches. I was the 5th coach in 10 years. It was my school, my university. And I wanted to make something of it. I wanted people to be proud of it. Now, you asked me what I learned. I learned that you have to have a thick skin. Yeah. You have to be able to withstand criticism, and I didn't always do that very well, to be honest with you. I was very sensitive to the fact that I knew that I wasn't the first choice to be the coach here. That a lot of people wonder, well, who is that guy? He's never even played basketball. He's never coached at this level. Why is he the coach at Mississippi State? So I felt like I had something to prove every day. Every day we went on the floor. And if you've probably talked to some of those players, but if you talk to those players that went through those first 3 or 4 years, what they endured is unbelievable. The work ethic that we made them have, and how hard we practiced every single day, because I knew our talent level at that point was not equal to LSU, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky. We had to be tougher. We had to be more physical. We had to be in better shape. And it just evolved. And so, we started winning and ended up winning that championship. And I tell people all the time, if not for that team, that 91 team, there never would have been a Final Four team. But those guys came here with no reason to come to Mississippi State except to represent their home state. And John Brady did a great job recruiting that team, a great job. And so, to me, that's the team that kind of turned the fortunes around for us.
And when you look at that 91 team, I mean, obviously that was several years in the making. You had to stack some classes together and put in all that work that you talked about. But at some point, the light bulb probably went off for you that, hey, this team may have a chance. When did that kind of come along with that team? When did you realize that, hey, we may have something here?
Well, I'll be honest with you, that second year when we went to Hawaii and played in their tournament, it was Hawaii's tournament. Back then it was called the Rainbow Classic, which was a huge tournament. And the only reason we were in it, Coach Boyd had scheduled that before he left, and he was friends with the AD out there. So he got us in that tournament. To give you an idea of where our program was, Hawaii, the host team, chose us the first round. So, you always want to win that first game. So we go out there and we play Hawaii the first game. We're behind 16-0 to start the game. We ended up winning the game. And then I knew this team has something. Now, we're not great yet, but there's something about this team that's going to make them special. And then we started winning some games the second and third year, and then, you're able to beat Alabama, who was defending national champions with Wimp Sanderson as a coach. Had great success against LSU teams with Shaquille O'Neal and Chris Jackson on those teams. But it just evolves over time. When you see Doug Hartsfield and Greg Carter and Cameron Burns and Todd Merritt and Carl Nichols, the improvement that they made year after year after year, and the work ethic that they had, if I can just make some right decisions and put them in the right places, we have a chance.
It had to be gratifying to see that group grow, to see the success they would have, to win that SEC championship in '91 for not only them, for yourself. You talked about how, maybe not being the favorite for the job when it originally came out. It was kind of a rubber stamp for all of you, this program, everything. When you clinched that championship, just what's that feeling? What do you remember about maybe that day of knowing, hey, we did it? I mean, not that you're done. There's still, just greater heights to reach. But what do you remember about that day?
What I really remember, Joel, is the excitement, the people coming over, on the fans, the students in particular, coming over press row and standing, just knocking everybody out of the way. And the court just being surrounded by our fans but what I remember, my wife came down out of the stands. We walked to the coach's locker room, and I started crying. It was a very emotional time for me, that we had done something that people said, you can't do at Mississippi State. Mississippi State can't win in basketball. We showed you can compete again in basketball at Mississippi State. That's what that team proved. I think that team changed the culture of our basketball program.
Yeah, and it kind of laid the foundation for what was to come, obviously, with the 96 team. And those guys are household names now, but they probably weren't household names when you went out to recruit them. A lot of those guys were, made within your program. I mean, I know my daughter graduated from South Lamar High School, which is where you got Darrell Wilson from. I know what kind of, it's a small little school over in Millport, Alabama. So those are the kind of places where you found some of these guys, Russell Walters, Bart Heisch. There's so many guys within that team. How did you kind of make up that roster, as you went out and started recruiting those guys and piecing this thing together?
Well, I was fortunate when I was here. I had some great assistant coaches, some great recruiters, but I'll name three in particular. John Brady, on my first staff, one of the great recruiters ever. Robert Kirby came in, fantastic recruiter, and then Rick Stansberry. Those three guys are three of the best recruiters ever. Now, Rick Stansberry recruited those players on that Final Four team. The way we got Darrell Wilson, we never saw Darrell Wilson play. I never saw him play till the first practice here. Ralph Radford, who was an assistant at Auburn, was a friend of Rick Stansberry's. And he called Rick. We needed a backup point guard. Mm-hmm. We were looking for a backup point guard. And Ralph Radford called Rick and said, Darrell had been in the camps at Auburn, said, I got a guy that's out there, nobody signed him. So we go visit with him, and he comes on campus to visit, and so we sign him. And I'll never forget Wimp Sanderson, who was my best friend in the league. We're still close friends. He called me. Wimp was the coach at Alabama at that time, and Darrell was a player of the year, high school player of the year in Alabama. But played, as you said, a little small high school, shot it a lot, just pressed and ran and all those things. Wimp called me. He said, why'd you sign that boy? And I said, Wimp, we needed a backup point guard, and we feel like he might be able to answer that. And I said, why do you ask that question? He said, well, that boy's not good enough. I said, well, how do you know that? He said, well, my assistants watched him play all year. Well, the first time I saw Darrell Wilson practice, I thought Wimp was right. He's not good enough. But little did we know the competitiveness that he has, the heart that he has, the will to succeed that he has. We knew he could shoot the basketball. We knew that part of it. The rest of it you find out as you get him. And when those lights came on and you started keeping score, Darrell Wilson was as good as there is. But that's how we found Darrell Wilson. Russell Walters, we'd recruited out of high school. we were recruiting Russell Walters and Jay Walton. We were going to sign whichever one of those we could get. And Russell committed to Alabama to go play for Wimp Sanderson. And so we signed Jay Walton. Russell stayed at Alabama 1 year, went back to Jones Community College, where his mom was administrator there, a registrar there. And so we recruited Russell out of Jones, so we had that prior relationship with Russell. And so that's how we got him. But, you know, you just have to, that's why I think it's important at a school like Mississippi State, maybe not as important now because of a lot of things, transfer portals, NILs, all those things. I felt like it was important for us to stay within our footprint. Mississippi, Alabama, maybe a little out of Louisiana, Georgia every once in a while, Tennessee, but a certain footprint. I just felt like it was important to recruit that area, and so that's what we tried to do. And, you know, those guys just came together. You know, Eric Dampier had been in our camp since he was like an 8th grader. So we're very well aware of Eric Dampier. We knew him from the time he was a youngster. But it's just, as I said, the 3 guys I had recruiting for me were 3 of the best. And they would work. They would outwork anybody. And if they got on a player and really wanted a player, they were going to outwork anybody else that wanted those players. And so we got lucky there. Not lucky, hard work got those players. Now, I don't take any credit for any of the recruiting. I was not a great recruiter. I'm the first to admit that. I coached the team. That's what I did. My recruiting consisted of, if one of the assistants say, Coach, I need you to drop so-and-so a letter today. Okay, I do that. I need you to call Daryl tonight or call Eric tonight or whatever. That's what I did. I do think this. When we went in home visits, I think that's where I was best as far as the recruiting process, because I thought I could sell Mississippi State because it's a product that I believed in with all my heart. And it was sincere when we went in those homes, and I started talking about our university and what it could mean to those players.
We obviously know the heights that this team would get to, but I'm curious, what was it like being the head coach of this team, given the talent, the personalities, I mean, some of the, like Logan mentioned, the biggest household names in Bulldog history there with Eric Dampier, and I don't think we mentioned Dante Jones yet, but he's on that roster. Maybe the greatest one-year Bulldog there's ever been. I mean, he just was one of my personal favorites watching that team. But what's managing that group like behind the scenes?
Not as hard as you would think. It really wasn't. You know, when we signed Dante, everybody said, oh, he'll never make it with Coach Williams. I was too hard. He was too, you know, loosey-goosey, whatever you want to call him. He was kind of a free spirit. He was not hard to coach. He really wasn't. In particular when he was playing, because he loved to play basketball. And I'll tell you a quick story, and I probably shouldn't tell this story because it'll tell people how stupid I was. We were recruiting Dante Jones. Of course, he was playing at Northeast Community College. And so Rick Stansbury had it set up. I was going to meet Dante on campus such and such time one afternoon. My first visit with Dante. So I get there. I think we're supposed to meet in the Commons maybe at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I get there a little bit before 3 o'clock, Dante doesn't show up. 3:10, no Dante. 3:15, no Dante. I call his advisor, and she says, well, let's see if we can find him. So finally we go back to the Commons, maybe 30 minutes later. Dante shows up with his little entourage already. Got an entourage. So he walks up, and I say, Dante, I'm Coach Williams, and let me explain something to you. If you come to Mississippi State, this is the last meeting you'll ever be late for. And his eyes got about that big around. Now, that's probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done, but it also might be one of the smartest things I ever did, because he knew right away that this is serious business, and you're going to do it the way we want it done. And as far as that goes, he was not hard to coach at all. He was actually fun to coach, because when he was playing, he loved to play, and he was fun, and he was funny. But Dante and Eric and Daryl and Marcus Bullard all became great friends, and they hung out together. That team was very close. Whit Hughes and Bart Heitch and Russell Walters, they were close. But they're all still friends today, and I think they're all in a group text and stuff, whatever that might be. I'm not sure. But they still communicate with each other today. But it was not a hard team to coach. The hard part about it was getting Dante to buy into his role of what he was supposed to do. He wanted the freedom to shoot it every time he touched it. He didn't want to guard anybody. And so, you know, I make jokes about it. We finally got him to the point where he would try to stay between his man and the basket every once in a while. But I did tell him this. I told him one night in a locker room, Dante, and I'm not going to tell you the words I used, but Eric Dampier and Darrell Wilson are going to take more shots than you're going to take. Now, you need to understand that. And so we made the rule. The first time you touch the ball on offense, unless it's right at the rim, you cannot shoot it. Now, when it comes back to you the second or third time, go do your thing. And he bought into it, and as you know, he became one of the greatest players in the history of our university. And I think the last part of the season, maybe the last month, 2 months, he's the best player in the country.
Yeah.
And he was the missing piece to our team. You know, we were a Sweet 16 team the year before. And so he was the missing piece because he was so dynamic as a scorer.
You talked about that last month or two of the season. Just it seemed like the team just kind of caught fire. Like I said, they had that postseason experience the year before, so there's the bright lights aren't that bright. I mean, they're kind of accustomed to that, but they took it obviously to another level in '96. Just that last month, when you caught fire, you won the SEC tournament. What was it about that team that made it so special that allowed it to catch fire and kind of build that momentum that took y'all all the way to the Final Four?
Well, I think some of it had to do with the lack of success we had early in the year. Now, we were winning games early in the year, but I remember I told the assistant coaches, I told Rick and Greg that, we're not playing our best basketball. We're winning because we're more talented than some of these teams we're playing right now, but we're not playing our best basketball. And I'll never forget, we went to South Carolina. Eddie Fogler was the coach. We got beat at South Carolina. And on that airplane coming home, I said, I don't know if we'll win another game. We weren't guarding. We weren't defending. We weren't executing on the offensive end. We just weren't playing together as a team. And so we got back, and I think we played Tennessee the next game and won that in a close game and lost to Alabama. And so we were struggling early in the year. We really were. And I think there were some different personalities on the team that maybe clashed at that point. And so we had a team meeting. And I talked about those things, and I talked about different personalities, that some of you may like some sort of music, some of you may like the other kind of music, some of you might like this, but we're all in here, we all have the same goal, and that's to make this team the best it can be and to win as many games. We all have the same goal, and to reach those goals, we've got to be more of a family. We've got to like each other. Don't have to love each other. We've got to like each other, and we got to enjoy being around each other. And so I think they bought into that, and they just became a closer basketball team. But the biggest difference was I think we just started defending better. And then when you have Eric Dampier, you have a chance. I'll be honest with you. He gives you a chance. Now, Dante and Darrell, they were going to make baskets. You knew that. But it allowed our defense to maybe pressure a little more in the perimeter, not worry so much about getting beat off the dribble. Because you got big Damp standing back in the middle of that lane. You got protection back there. So we just started playing better together, and people accepted their roles. And I think that's an important part of coaching, defining roles and getting players not necessarily to like their roles, but to understand and accept their roles. And if you can do that as a coach, then I think your team can be better.
This was a team that knew it was talented, that knew it had capability, but to go through the SEC tournament and then to knock off a Kentucky and win that championship, at that moment, did you kind of feel like we can beat anybody at this point? How big of a springboard was that to the run that you guys ultimately had in the NCAA tournament to beat Kentucky and know that, hey, yeah, there's no one that if we're on our game that night, we can take on anybody?
Well, that Kentucky team was undefeated going through the league. So, you beat that team. They'd lost one other game all year long. They lost to UMass early in the season. That's it. They had one loss going into that game and had been undefeated going through the SEC. And the SEC then was really, really strong. I don't know if you remember or not, but I think Georgia was one win away from being in the Final Four or the Elite Eight. Syracuse beat them. Georgia was that good. Yeah. I mean, they were really good. But that game obviously proved us, if we can beat Kentucky, we can play with anybody. Now, going into the tournament, we played VCU the first round. Sometimes you start wondering about that because we didn't play great.
Yeah.
But, you have a hangover from that win. That was a huge win. At that point in time, maybe not the biggest win in the history of our university, but certainly one of the biggest wins in the history of the university. Yeah. And you keep in mind, and I know you know this, Joel, but on that Sunday afternoon in the Superdome, Kentucky and Mississippi State, 11 players played in that game that eventually played in the NBA. Kentucky had 9 of them.
Yeah.
They had 9 future NBA players on that team. That's how good they were. So when you do that, that gives you confidence that you can play with anybody in the country if you play right and continue to play the way we're playing.
you look at the Final Four that year. I mean, obviously there's some of the blue bloods that are in college basketball, and I just remember the press conference and you bringing that hat up there on stage, and people are just like, people didn't expect a Mississippi State to be there, in the Meadowlands and playing in the Final Four, but there we were, and you were going to make sure that everybody knew that it was Mississippi State that was in the Final Four, and we deserve all the credit that we had earned.
Well, it bothered me a little bit that it didn't say Mississippi State on the caps. Obviously,
Yeah.
I think everybody knew that from the press conference. But I kept getting criticism from especially the national media, for talking about lack of respect. I think you can go back and look at any press conference. I don't think I ever initiated that conversation. I would answer the question to them. Why, Coach? Why do you think you don't get the respect you deserve, or why don't you get? I would answer that question, but as you guys know, because you're in the media, that's what you guys do. Sometimes the question is not shown, just the answer. So it looked like I'm always complaining about lack of respect. But what I'm doing, I'm answering the questions that they asked me about that. But I do think there was some lack of respect simply because we're a Mississippi school, a bunch of guys that weren't highly recruited players. And so, you do have a lack of respect simply because the national media, they're not aware of us like they are Connecticut, Kentucky, Cincinnati. And then I wasn't some coach that was out there, I'm not the personality of a Bob Huggins or a Calipari or Pitino. I'm not that personality. I am what I am. And, I'll never forget this. My second year with all those freshmen, we go to LSU and we beat LSU. First SEC road game in 3 years. Those freshmen are so excited. They come running to me. They want to pick me up and carry me off the court on their shoulders. I said, no. We're going to win a certain way and we're going to lose a certain way. And it's going to be with class. And so I didn't go running across the court when we do those things. Jim Valvano looking for people to hug and kiss. That's just not my personality. So I wasn't some guy that the national media was really going to take to heart, so to speak. I was just a Mississippi kid who was fortunate and happy to be able to coach a Mississippi team, in particular a Mississippi State team.
You knew in the moment that's special, to be in the Final Four and all that. It's been 3 decades since then, Coach. You've had plenty of time to look back on it and let it just be what it is. What does that year, that season to you, when you think back on it, just can you put into words how much that means to you and to this university and to the players that you still stay in contact with? And just can you even put into words how 30 years have made that even sweeter, probably?
Well, it's hard, Joel. It really is to put it into words. Of course, it's a special time in my life, a special time in the lives of all those players, and hopefully a special time for Mississippi State University and all those that follow our university. But I still get introduced all the time. Hey, this is Richard Williams. He took Mississippi State to the Final Four. My response to that is always, no, they took me to the Final Four. And a quick story, you're talking about New York City, and we're there for the Final Four. And we have some sort of press thing or we have to do before the game at Radio City Music Hall. And they have all 4 of the Final Four coaches down on this stage that I think the Rockettes would be on, and they would lift them up on stage before the Rockettes perform. Well, we're sitting down on this platform, and they're going to lift us up. And I'm sitting there looking, John Calipari, Rick Pitino, who else? Jim Boeheim, Richard Williams. What doesn't fit in this picture? What am I here for? I mean, not many years before that, I'm coaching at a junior college in the state of Mississippi with 3 of the greatest names in college basketball. It was a little bit overwhelming, to be honest with you. It really was. But as time goes on, it's just something that I'm just really proud of, to be able to say that I, was part of that team and was able to coach that team and still stay in touch with a lot of those players.
Yeah, and this weekend we have an opportunity. We're having an alumni weekend for basketball. What is it like for you as a coach to have a good number of your players back and to just probably pick up conversations that y'all had several years ago? I mean, it's like that, but just to see all your players, just how they've grown and their families, and just how special of a moment is that for you as their coach?
Well, I'm just glad the university is recognizing that team. As you said, it's been 30 years, and it's just great for me and for those guys at the university is recognizing that team. after all these years. And hopefully most of them will be here. I think most of them we've been in touch, they will be here. Not all of them. Some of them have commitments, family commitments, and just can't make it. But it's just a special time when we can get together. I still see some of the guys. I talked to Darrell Wilson probably. I talked to Bart Heights more than any of them. I talked to Darrell Wilson quite a bit. I see Eric at lunch occasionally. So Russell Walters has become a very, very, very close friend of mine. Just an outstanding person. And my wife and I both had some kind of serious surgeries this summer. And Russell was right there at the hospital with us and stayed in touch with us and prayed for us every day and prayed with us every day. He's become a very special part of my life, so I'm looking forward to seeing him also.
And of course, Coach, you get the chance to be around all the time now, part of our radio broadcast crew. And I think it's so awesome that you sit here and think about your career and, coming on staff here in the 80s to being the head coach to all these years later now, radio broadcast. You've touched so many eras of Mississippi State basketball. How neat is it now to just kind of sit back and I don't want to say you have no stress because I'm sure you want to win still just as badly as you did then, but to just get the chance to call today's generation of Bulldogs, the Josh Hubbards and go right on down the list of greats that we've had the last few years, and Tolu Smith and Cam Matthews and all the guys you had the chance to call. Is it keep you young, I guess, to stay around these guys?
It helps. It certainly does. It gives me something to do. It keeps me out of my wife's hair, So she doesn't mind my being up here to do these games, and she kind of enjoys listening to the games also. But it's fun for me, because I followed Mississippi State basketball, as I said, since I was a kid, and still follow it, and still want them to win with all my heart, and to watch the players as they've progressed and the teams that are good. Losses still bother me, not like they used to. I don't lose sleep over the losses anymore. My friend John Brady, who does the same thing for LSU basketball, it just kind of win, lose, or draw, it just goes over his head. But he tells me all the time, said, your problem is you still have that maroon blood running in you every time you lose. It makes you mad. I said, John, I can't help it. And he's right. I still have that maroon blood running in me, and I guess it always will. But the losses don't affect me nearly as much now. But I do enjoy what I'm doing and being able to broadcast the games. And I'm just happy that the university and that Learfield Sports has kept me a part of it these years, because I don't have any hobbies. This is it for me.
And you mentioned you caught that coaching bug early on in life, and you always that'll always be ingrained in you. Does doing the radio, does it keep you close enough to the game to kind of scratch that itch a little bit?
It does. Every once in a while, I tell people all the time, man, I'd love to have a team to coach again. I really would. I would love to have a team. At my age, I don't mean a team at this level. And, of course, if they came and offered me one of these $4 million contracts, I wouldn't say no, I assure you. But, no, coaching is just something I really enjoy doing. And I think it's because I wasn't a very good player. I think that has a lot to do with it. I wanted to be a player. I wasn't. But the coaching part and the teaching part was an outlet for me, because I don't hunt, I don't fish, don't play golf, don't play tennis. Coaching was it for me. And now being able to broadcast it is the closest thing I can get to coaching.
Coach, as we wind down here on the show, Logan and I have a common thread through the years that we ask a lot of our guests, and it seems to hit home a little more when it's somebody sitting on the couch like you, who I know how much this place means to you. It's always meant a lot to you. But that essentially is the question. If you kind of another one of those, if you can put it into words, questions, but what does this place mean to you? What does Mississippi State mean to you?
Well, I met a lot of lifelong friends here. Came here as just a naive, overwhelmed person only person in my family ever went to college. They ever had a college degree, and Mississippi State gave me that opportunity. Have lifelong friends here. My college roommate, Barry Goliath, who lives down in Biloxi, we still stay in touch. Ron Sennett is another close friend of mine. I see him frequently. It's just part of your life. And it's hard, as you said, it's hard to put into words, Logan, what it really means, other than it's just a place I grew up. It's a place where I went from being a very naive high school kid coming in here as a freshman, and you grow up and become more of a grown man. And then you leave here and you get out in the world, and Mississippi State has helped prepare you for those challenges and those battles you're going to face when you get out in the real world.
That's Coach Richard Williams, folks. Coach, I can't thank you enough for hopping on with us today. like said at the beginning of the show, I mean, you gave kid Joel and Logan so many great memories back in the day, and it's one of those pinch you moments type things for us that we get the chance now to run into you and get the chance to visit with you a little bit. It's pretty awesome, and the chance to have you here on the show today and walk back down memory lane a little bit, something that I know we treasure, and I'm pretty sure our fans will as well. Thank you for taking the time for us today.
Yeah, I thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
As head coach Richard Williams, you can see him this weekend as part of Alumni Weekend. Of course, you can see him every game right down there beside Neil Price calling the action.
You can definitely hear him on the radio.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. So be sure and come out and join us. All the home 2 games this week. Not sure quite yet when this will be up. We may have already played a home game this week by the time you hear this, but definitely on Saturday, Ole Miss here at the Humphrey Coliseum. A lot of our alumni honoring the 1996 Final Four team. A lot of cool stuff going on this weekend at the Hump. Hope to see you there. Thank you for joining us here today. From myself, from Logan, from Coach, Hail State.
Hail State.
Hail State.